Welcome to this neurocritical care MCQ series, and this is the third edition in which we will discuss few MCQs from seizures and few MCQs from neuromuscular junction diseases. So this is a 29-year-old young adult. A known case of generalized epilepsy was brought to the emergency department with convulsive status epilepticus. He was unable to consume his medications due to vomiting and diarrhea for the last 5 days. His vitals are as follows: heart rate 86, blood pressure 106 over 68 millimeter of mercury, saturation 100% on 2 liter of oxygen, temperature 100.2 degree Fahrenheit. After 2 mg IV push of lorazepam, conversion stopped. However, his mental status is altered. What is the next best step in the management for this patient? A. Intubate the trachea. B. Order EEG. C. Additional lorazepam 5 mg IV push followed by fosphenytoin 15 mg per kg IV. Or D. Perform CT brain. GCS is not good, so intubating the trachea may be appropriate, but remember 2 mg IV push of lorazepam probably is not a appropriate dose, because still mental state is altered, means that patient is having non-convulsive type of status epilepticus. So additional lorazepam 5 mg IV push is the correct option, and the proper dose you should remember is the 0.1 milligram per kg IV loading of lorazepam. So this is a very good review article. This is the update in the neurocritical care, according to which within 5 minutes you should be able to give the benzodiazepines, which are the drugs of choice, and they suggest lorazepam, and in the absence of venous access, IM midazolam is an appropriate option. And this is the 2016 evidence-based guidelines for the treatment of convulsive status epilepticus by American Epilepsy Society, in which they have given a nice table in which they have explained the first line drug to be IV lorazepam, but because the patient is convulsing and it is quite difficult to establish an IV access, so in that case IM midazolam may be a better option and has a superior effectiveness compared to IV lorazepam. A patient is noted to have status epilepticus while lorazepam is being administered. What do you order? A. Fosphenytoin, B. Valproate, C. Levetiracetam, or D. Any of the above. So the answer is any of the above, as we know from the guideline, the same 2016 guideline from American Epilepsy Society. They suggest second line drug to be of the second line drug, whether it be a valproate or levetiracetam or fosphenytoin, can be given as a second line drug, but just one drug, not a combination of anti-epileptic. A 50-year-old female is admitted to ICU with right MCA infarct, stroke. On day 4 in ICU, she is still drowsy. However, NCCT brain shows minor changes with no midline shift. Her current neurological examination showed symmetric and reactive pupils at 3 mm, right gaze preference but crosses midline, profound upper motor neuron facial droop on the left side, left arm and leg weakness. So these are the neurological findings in this patient who had developed a right MCA ischemic stroke. Patient did not follow commands on open eyes, but she continues to localize with the right arm. Given her profound stupor, an EEG was ordered, and a portion of the recording is shown in this figure. So this is the EEG given with this question, and now the part of question is what is the next best step in the management for this patient? Continue same treatment. Start injection levetiracetam 500 mg twice a day. Administer lorazepam 1 mg IV once, or neurosurgery consultation for cranectomy. So what should be the best step in the management for this patient? So look at this EEG. There are few spikes, in few of the electrodes of EEG, and these spikes are very low amplitude and at regular intervals. So probably this is quite a normal variant, and these kind of questions may be asked in entrance examinations and board certification exams, and you must be thorough with the EEG. So the answer to this question is continue the same treatment, because this is a normal variant known as periodic lateralized epileptiform discharges, PLEDs, which is quite a common normal thing characterized by spikes or sharp waves occurring at approximately regular intervals, and they are commonly seen in patients with multiple CNS diseases like acute ischemic stroke or tumor or infection like meningitis, meningoencephalitis, or any type of traumatic brain injury, hemorrhages, or metabolic disorder, and it does not need any anti-epileptic administration. So in ICU, continuous rather single routine EEG is recommended to be performed as a single routine EEG, because it misses around half of the non-convulsive features. Continuous EEG monitoring is suggested in high-risk neurosurgical or neurological patients. So this kind of EEG you may get in exams. So all areas of the brains having electrical discharges displayed in EEG. And this is again one more EEG, only left hemispheric sphere is involved. So, and they are changing in the morphology, sharp spikes waves, and increasing frequency and amplitude. Now question number 14. A 76-year-old man fell down from stairs and developed head injury, for which he was brought to the emergency department by his relatives. He was conscious but disoriented on examination. Vitals were normal. An urgent NCCT was performed of the brain, of course, and we showed 5 millimeter right STH. Neurosurgery suggested to start anti-epileptic, and then valproate was started. So what is the correct statement regarding the valproate prescription in this patient? Its efficacy is same as phenytoin to prevent early seizure prevention, but it improves the mortality rate. B, it is coagulopathic, leading to possible hematoma expansion. C, it has a multiple drug interactions due to induction of CVP system. Or D, it can cause acute kidney injury. So which one is the correct statement? The correct statement in this question is that it is coagulopathic and leading to possible hematoma expansion. This is the correct expansion, and rest of the choices are probably wrong. And this is a very good question regarding the pharmacology of valproate, and you can be asked in exam the pharmacology of valproate or the phosphatidine or benzodiazepines and carbamazepine. So many drugs can be asked in exam. So you must be thorough with the pharmacology, critical care pharmacology. So in valproate pharmacology, we should remember few salient points, like it is very highly protein bound. So because it is protein bound, highly protein bound, so it can displace the drugs which are loosely bound to the protein like phenytoin. So it can increase the level of phenytoin if given together. So that's very important fact. Then it is a CYP inhibitor, cytochrome inhibitor. So it inhibits the metabolism of the drugs which are metabolized by the cytochrome P450 system in the liver. So thereby it increases the level free level of various drugs. So that's very bad about the valproate. So it causes so much of perturbations in the levels of various drugs when you are using a valproate in ICU. It is mainly metabolized in the liver through the glucuronidation. That's why it is hepatotoxic. It's quite safe in AKI. So you should remember in AKI it can be used very well. Same efficacy as phenytoin, but it increases the mortality compared to phenytoin. That's also a fact in few studies only. And it is coagulopathic, decreases both platelet numbers and platelet functions and factors, and hence theoretically increases the risk of hemorrhage size. A 30-year-old man developed progressive weakness in legs, noted by dragging his feet 2 days back, and later by having difficulty with climbing up stairs. He presents to emergency department. On probing the history, first he recalls having abrupt onset lower back pain prior to the weakness, but he denies trauma. He denies recent infection also. On examination, he is noted to have moderate bilateral facial weakness, dysarthric speech, and weakness of ankles and hip flexors. Deep tendon reflexes are intact and normal. So this is very good question in which many neurological findings have been clubbed together to give you clues to differential diagnosis. So now you must tell me what is most likely diagnosis: radiculopathy secondary to herniated disc, or transverse myelitis of the thoracic cord, or acute inflammatory demyelinating polyradiculoneuropathy, or amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. So what's your choice over here? So answer is acute inflammatory demyelinating polyradiculoneuropathy, which is quite common in this young age because the weakness is progressive and it is ascending. So this is the answer. So as I said, this is a young patient having progressive weakness in the legs and having bilateral facial weakness and dysarthritic speech. Okay. So features of upper motor neuron involvement are absent. Amyotrophic lateral sclerosis cannot be there. So you must see this also. So upper motor neuron involvement is not there in this question. So amyotrophic lateral sclerosis or multiple sclerosis can be ruled out. So only remain to differential diagnosis is acute inflammatory demyelinating polyneuropathy with bulbar involvement. So this is a bulbar variant of GPS. So in discussion, there are three types of Guillain-Barré syndrome. This is the normal neuron coming from the spinal cord and going to all the way to muscles through neuromuscular junction. So this you should know, the normal motor neuron. So what happens in acute motor axonal neuropathy? So what happens here is the axon which is inside get lost, it gets degraded. Now why it happens? Because of antibody to axons. So this is the axonopathy variant of Guillain-Barré syndrome. Another variant is demyelinating variant, which is quite common, which is more common and having the more favorable outcome. In this, what happens is the outer covering, the myelin sheath of the neuron gets degraded, dissolved by attacking of the antibody towards it, and because of that, what happens? The conduction becomes very slow, and that is why, because of slowed conduction, you develop weakness. So not complete paralysis but weakness. So that's quite peculiar to Guillain-Barré syndrome. This is question number 16. A 51-year-old woman with myasthenia gravis on immunosuppressive therapy with azathioprine is admitted to the ICU for breathlessness. Upper respiratory tract infection occurred 1 week back, for which she was started on tablet levofloxacin 3 days ago. Since then she has had a progressive dyspnea and was unable to walk up a flight of stairs. Her initial vital signs in the emergency department were normal, and her oxygen saturation was 98% on room air with a respiratory rate of 24 per minute. She appeared comfortable, and although tachypneic, she did not have accessory muscle use. She underwent bedside spirometry testing and was found to have a negative inspiratory force of -40 mm of mercury and forced vital capacity of 0.75 liter. An arterial blood gas was obtained in the intensive care unit and was like this: the pH 7.32, PCO2 32 and PO2 171. So regarding decision to intubate the trachea, which statement is the most appropriate one? A. Tracheal intubation should be performed using depolarizing muscle relaxant in view of tachypnea, low forced vital capacity and respiratory alkalosis. B. Tracheal intubation should be performed using non-depolarizing neuromuscular blocker in view of tachypnea, low forced vital capacity and respiratory alkalosis. Defer tracheal intubation as she is comfortable with the appropriate negative inspiratory force. However, continue closed neurologic or respiratory monitoring. D. Defer tracheal intubation as she is comfortable with appropriate negative inspiratory force. However, bi-level positive airway pressure support should be initiated. So what's your choice over here? So this is a very big MCQ, very it's the stem is quite in detail, and that's why it takes long time to read. So such questions, when you get an exam, you are scared because you are losing time, but time is not a problem in need super specialty. So give time. So here few important salient points are that patient is comfortable despite the tachypnea and having a good negative inspiratory force. So if it is less than -30, then you have to be worried, but here the inspiratory force is quite okay. That's why I think, and then also PCO2 is not going up, it's low, so that's okay. That's because of probably fever also. So in this case I think the answer may be C or D. Okay, deferred tracheal intubation, but whether to put a BiPAP or not, that's the question. So either option D is correct, because this is a case of impending respiratory failure. Anytime she may become weak. So this is the case of myasthenia gravis. Anytime she may become weak, that's why we have to put in BiPAP. So there is a 20-30-40 rule to guide for decision to intubation. If FVC is less than 20 ml per kg or less than 1 liter or more positive than NIF minus 30 centimeter of water, positive expiratory pressure less than 40 centimeter of water, in that case you should be able to. So follow next video on neurocritical care MCQs. I think we will cover in the next video few more sections in neurocritical care. So till then, bye bye and stay safe, stay blessed.